What is up, everyone? Barricade here, and bringing you guys another part of Gears of War Bloodlines novel here. In the last part we saw Gabe had to go on a mission to try to rescue Ghost Squad as they went silent on Knifespire. So we're going to go ahead and dive right into it, guys, here. So at the very beginning of this part, Gabe is getting his teams ready to go to Knifespire, and they're manning the Navigator. Blair has her squads ready, and Gabe lets everyone know to expect the UIR because they're going to Knifespire. Everyone went silent, so obviously something is going on. Gabe is riding on the modified boat with Gian, and they simply pass a small fishing island known as Adana. He waves at the natives, but they ignore him like they always do, and they pass right by it. As they're doing so, they see that at this point there's nothing but ocean until Knifespire. As they pull closer to the island, they can see that there is smoke coming from it, and they pull up onto what is called Scabbard Cove, only to find that the LCU boat that Ghost Squad came in was damaged, sinking, and laying on its side. Gabe could see 3 of the 4 rafts that came from the boat on the shore, but there was no sign of Wyatt or the rest of Ghost Squad. As they're approaching, they can see that there is actually a big UIR frigate training its guns on the LCU boat. Gabe states that they could use the smoke as cover and approach the shore, and once they do so, that Blair and everyone needs to follow him on the shore to look for Ghost Squad. And while they're doing this, the sniper known as Davis needs to stay back and train her sniper on the shore, and if she sees anybody that is not Cog, to drop them. Davis is quite nervous because she wanted to go with him, but she listens in the end. As they start approaching the shore, the UIR frigate starts opening fire, and they have to do it as fast as possible. So they pull up on the shore. Gabe and Blair jump off and start making their way towards the shore with her squad. Mendes is manning the boat, whereas Davis is using her sniper, training on the shore. Luckily, the turbos they had on the boat helped them push around the shoreline to where the UIR had to actually pull up anchor and pursue that way. So since they have to actually go through this maneuver, it's going to give them some time to make it to Scabbard Cove and essentially do what they need to do. As they pull up on the shore, they can see that fire is just erupting from the island itself. You can see it in the jungles, just muzzle fires everywhere. They pulled up as close as possible, and when Gabe jumped into the water, he had to ignore the initial shock of how cold the water was, and he starts making his way towards the shore with his squads. And as he's doing this, he can see Wyatt and Ghost Squad laying prone against a broken down palm tree with just muzzle fires everywhere coming from every direction on the island. Gabe runs up to Wyatt, and Blair and her squads take cover in positions where they could. As he was approaching, Davis was staying on the boat, of course, using her sniper, just shooting everywhere she could see muzzle fire, hoping to hit something. And while she was missing, she did succeed in gaining their attention, and they trained their shots from the people on the shore towards the boat itself. At this point, Mendes had already shut off the engine to kind of give them a good position, but once the gunfire came on them, Mendes immediately punched the boat again, and they just started kind of driving around trying to avoid the fire, with Davis using her sniper and one of the other soldiers on the boat using the gun on the deck to fire back as well. At this point, Gabe is with Wyatt, and Wyatt tells him, thank you for coming, and Gabe says to save it for later and asks about the situation and what happened. And Wyatt simply states that they were here doing a mission, and when they came back to just get some supplies at the shore, they were only about halfway through their op. Out of nowhere, the UR just shows up and just started attacking them. And at that point, they already downed the boat. They got split up. Gabe asks where is the rest of Ghost Squad, and Wyatt states that they all got split up and that at this point they're keeping radio silence because I guess that's something that they do when they're under attack, which just doesn't make sense to me. And Gabe, he feels the same way, and he says, fuck that, and then he tells him to raise his men on the comms and essentially to just make it to a rendezvous point. Gabe lets Wyatt take point, and it's kind of funny how he does this because he lets him do it simply to save face with his own squad, because he knew that if Gabe took point, that it would make Wyatt look bad. So he lets Wyatt take point, so Wyatt looks like he's, in charge and everything, so his squad wouldn't think less of him. At this point, Gabe tells Blair and her squad to share some ammo because Wyatt and Ghost Squad literally didn't have anything. They were just sitting there on the ground uncovered, just getting shot at, and they were doing nothing to fight back. And Gabe realized it's simply because they did not have ammo. After they share the ammo, everyone just starts running and make a break for it to the rendezvous point. Gabe sees one of Wyatt's men hit and just completely falls lifeless to the ground in a horrible lifeless flop. At that point, Gabe realized what that meant. As they're running, he can see that one of Wyatt's men is actually trying to drag the fallen comrade by his collar the rest of the way, and actually does. Surprisingly, no one else really gets hit or any casualties. They reach a trailhead at the end where Gabe asks Wyatt about the rest of Ghost Squad, where they at, did they talk to him or anything. Wyatt states that they heard him and are on the way to the rendezvous. Wyatt stops for a second, looking back at Knifespire, looking north, and they're going south at this point. They're running south, but Wyatt stops and looks north at Knifespire. Gabe looks at him and says, "I don't like that look, Wyatt." Like, looks like Wyatt almost wants to turn back and go back to Knifespire while they're getting gunned down at. And Wyatt just turns back south and just keeps going back to the rendezvous instead. So he kind of stopped, looked back that way, looked like he was going to, but he changed his mind and still went with Gabe to the rendezvous. As they reached the rendezvous, Gabe could see that the UIR frigates are finally starting to make their way around to their position, so they need to leave now. Gabe screams, "Go, go!" and they're just running for their lives, and they have to run through this very narrow trail that is kind of bad at this point because they're getting gunned down on, and the very narrow trail essentially only allows single file running. So basically everyone's just running through a very single file way while everything is exploding around them. As they're running, Gabe could see a wall of jungle to his right, and to his left is just nothing but a natural wall of jagged rock that's about waist high with nothing but shore and water about 20 feet below. So just imagine them running through a narrow pathway where to the right is nothing but jungle, and the left essentially is a cliff. They're like on a cliff with a small barrier wall about waist high. And during this whole time, they're getting shot at like crazy. As they're running, Gabe gets tripped by a piece of random vine that actually snares his feet. But when he does so, he turns his body in a weird way that allows him to basically roll and immediately come up running again. So they're just, they're running for their lives at this point. As they're making their way, they could see that the UIR soldiers are approaching through the trail where they came from. And eventually one catches up to them. A tall man with tan skin, a shaven head, and essentially just, you could tell that he's a part of the UIR. He cuts Gabe off, and Gabe aims his lancer at him while the man aims his marksa. But before any of them could fire, the ground around them collapses because one of the UIR's frigates' fire hits the cliffside, kind of just disorienting anything, and the ground around them actually starts collapsing. As Gabe gets his bearing, he could see that the UIR soldier is hanging with one leg on the cliff, trying to pull himself up. And as Gabe sees this, he takes his opportunity and starts aiming his lancer again at the man to try to take him down before he can pull himself up. But once again, the frigate lands another shot between them, and just explosions everywhere. So at this point, Gabe just takes the opportunity to just leave. He's just like, all right, there's no point in even trying to fight this guy. I need to leave. So he just takes off, and he meets up finally. He's like essentially the last one in the single files from what it sounds like. And he makes up with everyone, meets up with Blair, rest of Ghost Squad, and they get to essentially a flat stretch of land with no foliage on it. It's just simply land. And he could see that the 3 patrol boats that came with him, because I don't believe I mentioned it so far, but basically when they went to the island, they came with 3 boats. Guillen was the driver of one of them, and that's the one that Gabe is on, the one with the turbos. And then there's 2 other boats that are pretty similar, but the only thing is they don't have the turbos. They're just like normal boats, essentially. And when he makes his way to them, he can see that actually the rest of Ghost Squad, the half of the team that Wyatt was trying to save, is already there, and they're already on the boats ready to take off. And they essentially just get everyone on these boats, and they just start driving. But before they leave, Wyatt stops and said that they left equipment behind, very important equipment behind at Knifespire. And Gabe tells him, to forget it. We need to leave. And Wyatt says, Hoffman's going to be pissed. Which Gabe responds with, Hoffman's going to be really pissed if we die. So which is true, you know, I mean, yeah, they really need the equipment, but if they go back and they all die, Ghost Squad dies, I mean, what's the point of that? So they might as well just take a good retreat so they can survive to fight another day. At this point, everyone hops on the boats respectively and they just take off. And Gabe orders his men in all 3 boats to go west. At this point, Mendes argues, stating that they need to go southeast instead and use that fishing island known as Adena as cover. Gabe replies with the fact that their boat has the turbos and they could easily go that way and outrun the UIR frigates, but the problem is that the other 2 boats don't have the turbos. So if they go that way, they would be able to escape, but the other 2 would more than likely get gunned down. And then this was a really cool part here that Gabe kind of pulls a really amazing strategy here, or I guess you can say a tactic, is that he tells them to go this other direction. And everyone's just like, kind of like, what the hell? Why are we going this way? And they were getting really worried because they're kind of going in a way that the UIR could easily follow them. And Gabe even tells his, men to actually slow down a little bit to let them catch up, which makes his men even more scared. Like, what are we doing? We should be leaving. Why are we letting them catch up? And the whole point of it was, if you guys remember in the last video, I mentioned that there was a part where Gabe was looking at the map before he even left the Knifespire. And when he was looking at the map, he noticed that there was some other part of land or something in the far distance, a marked spot on the map essentially, that was kind of far away from Knifespire, and it was just marked for no reason. Turns out that the reason why it was marked was that little tiny piece of land that he was looking at on the map was actually a sandbar, essentially a small, very tiny piece of land that barely pokes out of the water. And essentially what he does is he makes everyone follow him and go through that little tiny sandbar. And the sandbar has a little bit enough of a crease of water that allows his boat and the other boats to pass through it. The UIR frigates are coming at them full force, and before they realize it, they're going to crash into the sandbar because that little tiny crevice of water allowed Gabe's boats to make through it, like I mentioned, but the UIR frigates were way too big to pass through the sandbar that way. They would have to go all the way around, but since they noticed it too late, they simply just crash into the land and they just become stationary. They can't move. And it's funny how the book described it, because one frigate crashes and kind of gets stationary, stuck, and then the other one right behind it is pursuing like really fast, and like it realizes last second like, oh no, and it like tries to stop, but before it could even stop, it just smacks right into the other one. So essentially they crash into each other, leaving both huge frigates just stuck on the tiniest piece of land. And at this point, Gabe tells his men, now south, Mendes, get us the hell out of here. And then Mendes replies with pleasure, sir. And then they just leave. And that's where this particular part of the book ends for now. So just once again, guys, it's kind of crazy. They just went to Knifespire, picked them up, and they just took off. So that's a really cool thing about this part of the book. I was really kind of worried that Gabe was going to find Wyatt dead, but at least so far at this point, Wyatt is still alive. We'll figure out what happens next in the next part. But if you guys like this video, please definitely hit that like button and subscribe and tell me what you guys think about Gears of War Bloodlines so far. One thing I just want to say real quick, guys, I know that these parts are getting smaller and smaller, and I apologize about that. Essentially, I'm trying to kind of balance my life with playing Gears Tactics, because that game actually takes a really long time to beat. Like, it's been about 2 weeks and I'm barely at the end of the game right now. I'm going to try to upload the final part either tomorrow or sometime later this week. I'll see as far as I could beat the boss, because honestly the final boss is ridiculous, but we'll see how that goes. But once I finish Tactics, I'll be able to focus on the novel more. So I'll be able to make longer parts. So just kind of deal with me here on the small parts for now, but it'll get better, within the next few weeks. But anyways, guys, thanks for watching, and take it easy. Thanks for watching this video. If you want to see my most recent Gears of War video, hit that link on the left. If you want to see any of my other content, hit that link on the right. Thanks for watching, guys.